talked about the significance of place
Yeah.
in relation to this, and it made me think about the position of the puppets in general within the exhibition and outside. And I think there's something very interesting that happens culturally when you take an object from its function, even if that function is to be a puppet, and you put it in a very different space with a very different narrative and context. To me, that was very striking in the exhibition, because they were puppets and they were objects, and they were someone's objects, but they were also your stories that you found in them as a visitor. And I wonder how you see it and how you see the kind of puppets within it. What significance did they carry for you within the exhibition and in the context of the exhibition? Did they become different things? Bearing in mind that you probably have a very different relationship to them.
Yes, because quite a few of them I'd made as well as animated. So I think that gives you a totally different relationship to them. I mean, I think somebody within the creative banter said, do they retain something of me within them when you've made them and performed with them? I suppose it's all conjecture and romance, but I would like to think that there's some essence of me within some of those puppets. And then it's intriguing when you look at the Joe Beebe puppets, the Punch and Judy, because you know, they're very much Joe's puppets, and I'm very conscious that, you know, he is within them. He, you know, I'd love to get them, oh gosh, what do they call it? Forensic. I'd love to get a forensic expert to actually, you know, try and extract if there's any DNA within the fabric, and you know, I could, you know, I'd love to do that. So, gosh, I've lost the track of your wonderful question now. Going off on my own fancies.
I think you were sort of answering it. I mean, I think a different way to ask that question would be, now, however many months later, what is a dead puppet for you? And what is a dead puppet after the exhibition?
Gosh, no, that's a good question, because, you know, they're now all in my workspace in Loughborough in boxes and stored away, and the space is quite restricted, so I can't really get at them that easily. So they are kind of embalmed within that space, really.
Like a puppet mortuary.
Yes, they are. Yeah, and before Dead Puppet, you know, I had them around, but because they had to then be extracted and, you know, put into the containers to enable us to take them to Manchester, and then they are all packed up much more carefully than they were when I was filling the van with them to drive them to Manchester. So I've kind of left them in that state, really.
So they've been on a journey.
They certainly have been on a journey. Yeah, I did wonder what they were thinking as, you know, these strangers were invading their space and looking at their clothes and makeup.
Do you feel they reacted differently over the period of time? I mean, do you think the exhibition itself changed over the period of time that it was there?
Well, I mean, when I was doing the get-in, which was a really nice process, but full on, because it was 10-hour days I did for 2 weeks, solid, including the weekends. So it was nice having, and it was a walkthrough, so people who worked at Zion would walk through, and there was definitely a kind of sense of excitement as the exhibition took shape. It definitely generated some energy, I mean, and again, in the creative banter, I referenced someone who said that the atmosphere was charged. I think towards the end, and again, this could be me being total romantic, but you know, there did seem to be a settling, actually, of that energy. Yeah.
And there's an interesting, I guess it's sort of almost medical language in which we're both talking about in relation to the puppets. Reanimation being a kind of obvious example of that. And even I think the fact that I agree that I don't know if anything couldn't be said to be destroyed in there. And to me that really imbues it with this sense of aliveness, even though we're talking about dead puppets. I just wonder whether you thought that and what you thought about that.
Well, again, I'm kind of mindful of some very pertinent comments that you made. I think when we were in the Punch and Judy room, which you know, I did use technology within that to generate narrative around the pieces of work that I was showing, and you made a comment that the technology brought the past into the present or the future, and I'm kind of on that dichotomy now with my future practice, partly because I'm applying for follow-on funding and looking how to frame that. And it just seemed that technology is enabling quite an interesting development of the archive. And so I'm kind of exploring 3D scanning, which will enable the very fragile puppet to be literally reanimated. I mean, to be honest, a lot of it leaves me cold, because I think it's so removed from the filth of the object. But I suppose as an artist curator, I'm also interested in how you present that to audience, to retain some of the filth.
I'm just thinking, I like the word "the filth of the object."
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Does that have to do with materiality or with the life of the object? I really like the implications of a filthy object.
Yeah. Well, with Ducote's history, if we're looking at Ducote's work, then it certainly means the kind of history and the narrative of its previous life, as well as the materiality of the object, because we certainly dealt with the underbelly of life, if you like. Yeah. And, you know, even with Joe Beebe's puppets, you know, the filth, the dirt of those, and knowing about his own death and him lying in his flat for a week before he was discovered, just the whole, well, the sadness and the filth of that, I suppose, has some kind of resonance with how I presented his work. With the puppets that I had from the Puppet Centre Trust, they're far more, the filth is far more contained and to a certain extent sanitised. And possibly not in a, following the protocol of archive. So when I experienced some lectures from these three amazing archivists from the Puppet Museum in Lyon, the detail and the rigour that they went through about whether they should remove the dirt from a costume of a puppet was amazing. You know, it made the ethics committee of Central, you know, look like you know, a nursery rhyme. I mean, it was amazing the rigour that they went through. That doesn't translate in the ethos of certain archivists within the puppet world who will think nothing of shoving a costume in the washing machine with, you know, biological detergent or whatever, because then when it's presented it will be crisp and clean, and so there's a different level of debate going on. Having said that, that same archival mind would be horrified that I use the figures. So the ventriloquist dummy that was within the spook room, I used within a show, and Golem, and I made the choice that I knew I was destroying it as I was using it. And I know Michael Dixon was horrified that within the work I broke the fingers of the hand of the puppet. But I really love it because I tried to then repair it. And do you know, during the tour, it would never heal. Even though I cleaned the wood and I put the wood glue on, it should have just stuck, but it never. So within it, I put a little bandage around it. So, you know, I'm not trying to criticise anybody within this discussion, because, you know, there's two sides to every coin. But it is quite intriguing in how you deal with the preservation of the archive and how then technology will enable that. I mean, I do find the scanning a bit clean because it has cleaned up the image. So again, I'm quite interested in how you can have that quality of the scanning, but you can also keep the dirt. And I've got a dialogue going with Brigitte Jose, who's at Central St Martin's, who's very interested. She's an animator and she's very interested in archive. And I think through collaborating with her, we could keep the filth as well as having the scan.
Can I ask it's not a terminal question, it's a final question. Why is DEADpuppet important?
What, the title?
The exhibition.
Oh gosh. Well, I like to think it's important in terms of being an articulation of an artist as curator who's presenting the archive, rather than, say, Kathy Hale at the V&A creating an exhibition of puppets. Because I like to feel that there's a different sensibility there in how they're presented. So I think that is important to be seen in terms of opening up the dialogue of how we access archive to the public gaze.
Is there a torch?
Yeah, well, I'll immediately confess to you that this was an absolute fluke, because we were working right up until the last minute. I mean, Justin Farndale, you know, he teaches and he kind of came down and all the kind of stuff, so right to the last minute. And he said, oh yeah, well, I can put a flood and then it'll bounce off the walls and you'll have all the shadows and it'll be, you know, great. And I said, that sounds lovely. Yes, please. And then, of course, last minute kind of put it in and it looks absolutely pants. So then I was thinking, oh my goodness, you know, and he had to catch a train and la la la. And I just saw the torch, because you know, you can't do better really than just seeing them animated with the torch. So and I think Emma will will back me up on this. I mean, this has been one of the most popular rooms of people just having a play. I mean, they are very, very good quality torches. Quite a bit of my budget went on these two, which is why you get such a beautiful shadow. But you can. So it kind of works quite well. But sorry, Deanna.
No, I mean, I was just curious what you thought the difference. What did you think happened when you put these two in the same room together?
I kind of quite like the clash. And it's also being respectful of people's interest in coming to see the work. So, I've kind of mixed weird shit with kind of, obvious, beautiful, exquisite examples of the shadow puppet. So I just enjoy, having them in both spaces.
Is there anything confrontational about them being on two separate walls facing each other?
Not as a conscious divide. I think it's kind of quite nice and clean to have the more traditional on one side rather than mix them all up. And also these are kind of on the same narrative of the street. This was the kind of Wally Range flats that Rachel Field and I shared. So these are all stories from the street. So again, that was another reason to contextualise them together.
And this room made me think, and this is a very big question, but I wondered whether when an object becomes a puppet, at what point does that happen, and if you need an animator or a puppeteer to turn that object into a puppet, or whether that's even any sort of problem in a place like this, in this context.
Well, I'm reminded that sometimes a puppet's at its most powerful when it's still. I mean, it's kind of going back to Sarah's earlier point. So I don't feel a puppet has to wiggle and waggle to have some potency and power and be a puppet.
But don't you think it gets, the power is coming from when you use the torch to give it the movement? So it is the movement that's giving the object the power once you are using the torch to animate it and move it.
I think you're kind of releasing something within the object when you have the torch. But I think that essence is still within the object without the torch, if you see what I mean. If that's not sounding totally pretentious.
I guess the difference, I don't know, I just haven't thought about these things, but thinking of a still puppet. So is the difference between that and, say, a statue, which would be still, is that the puppet has potential to move and have animation, albeit from soldier to person. Otherwise, a still puppet could be a mini statue.
Yes.
I think it's about the layers of meaning for me personally. I was walking past Prince Albert's statue in St Albert Square, and he dramatically changed because I just watched a recent TV programme about Queen Victoria, and the entire meaning of that person changed to me.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was quite muted. Oh, it's just one of those Victorian objects. So I think it's more about the interpretation of the viewer the experience comes from. That really challenges and nurtures the story of that object in one form or the other.
Yes. I'm reminded of when I was first invited to put forward a suggestion in terms of the application for the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And I was invited to go and have coffee and a chat with the Dean, Andrew Lavender. Well, it certainly wasn't a chat and there wasn't any coffee. It was a grueling. But But he did make a very valuable contribution, actually, which probably clinched the deal, and that was the word immanence. He kind of thought that immanence was the word that was kind of linking all the different threads of the research that I was going to hopefully look at. And I think possibly Val, that's the difference with the puppet and the statue, although I would argue and agree with Shamal that there's still that vision around a statue for the possibility of it turning its head. But I suppose if it's a puppet, then we know that there's the imminence of that potential.
The statues of Anna Maria Pachenko, which are fantastic, when you walk among them, you feel as though they have potential for movement, that you relate to them, that they're very, very powerful, and yet they are solid.
Yes.
But they are also set in the scene.
They are set in the scene. Have eye contact with other.
They do. So they do the scene. That's right. They have engagement somehow in a very perhaps the imminent way.
Yes.
Maybe that's the imminence.
It's all fascinating, isn't it?
Yes.
Should we maybe have a look at the Punch and Judy?
Yes. I will allow you to sit in that chair.
Is it part? Oh, it is part of the exhibition.
No, please remain seated. And the funny thing was that it was on exhibition at Central School of Speech and Drama, and I came back the next day and I thought, bloody hell, where's the coat? and security had removed it because I thought somebody had left it behind.
But I was thinking about how every time you put objects in a space, there's a kind of historicization that happens, because we see them in the past for some reason, because of how we look at them. And I thought it was really interesting thinking about your work with Punch and Judy and seeing a sort of computer animation that you can engage with, and a lot of projection and use of technology, which to me kind of shattered that a little bit. So I just wondered.
Well, I mean, again, I've been a bit indulgent. I mean, this is placing my research my contemporary research with a set of Punch and Judy puppets within the context of the DEADpuppet exhibition. Partly because I wanted to share, my contemporary take on having these amazing puppets, which was sold to me by Joe Beebe, and he died 7 months after selling me the puppets, and sadly I never met him, and that's a great sorrow to me. I would have loved to have met and engaged with Joe Beebe, but because of the privilege of my research, I could indulge myself and kind of start a process where I was trying to find Joe. And I'm trying to find Joe by taking on the persona of Joe. And I took on the persona of Joe, and I started with boxing puppets. Because Punch and Judy, I mean, my previous work with Ducot, my favourite review was breathtakingly pretentious. I mean, it was completely out there, and then I started to engage with the street show Punch and Judy, which is kind of like that far apart. And so to begin with, I started to work with the boxers because I could immediately start to work with them, because for the punch sound you have to use the swazzle, which is a reed that you place in your mouth and you speak through the swazzle, and that's quite a difficult thing to sort of learn, really. So the boxers, they don't use the swazzle, so I could immediately start to work with them and be out on the street and start to try and experience what it's like with Punch and Judy and the audience right in your face.
So, so I didn't want to be in the booth, I wanted to be outside. And so I added this bungee rope because a lot of the routine with the boxes, you need the playboard to bash them against. So I needed something to add the tension. So that's why I had the bungee rope, so they're kind of like in the ring. And then I thought, well, what the hell am I doing here? And when I first presented it, I was like the referee, so I sort of had a dicky bow and everything. But then when I went to perform in Mayfair, for the Punch and Judy Mayfair festival, I took on the persona of Joe. And then I was Joan with the Punch and Judy. And then somebody, Punch and Judy man, Jeff Felix, said, yeah, we're all very well, you know, it's a bit freaky seeing you walking around with your little box of puppets like Joe. But where is the stain on Joe's tie? And apparently Joe was quite a messy eater and he would have a stain on his tie. And I thought, well, what an amazing thing. I must do that as a performance, place the stain on Joe's tie. So I kind of had that rattling around in my head. It was about 10 years, I think. And then it was last year, it was the 350th anniversary of Punch. It was his birthday. And there was this great big grand meal for all the Punch and Judy men at this big hotel. And I thought, well, that's the place to place the stain on Joe's tie. And I had previously, my work with Joe's puppets is terribly contentious within certain Punch and Judy men. It didn't help that I was filmed on national news saying that I felt Punch and Judy was a horrid show. So it was a bit tricky. So I couldn't actually do the stain on Joe's tie as a public performance. It was done as a private one, and I'm so pleased to see Rosie Martin has just walked in totally on cue, because Rose is the photographer who I've worked in collaboration to create these pieces of work. So Rosie came with me to the meal, and I placed the stain on Joe's tie as a private ritual, really. The two people sharing the table with me knew what we were doing. And I was then asked to create a piece of work for the Collisions Festival, and so I kind of created this installation. And then what really makes me laugh is that for the Big Grin had a symposium about Punch and Judy, and I presented the paper which was entitled The Stain Too Far. And so I questioned whether I should have placed the stain on my tie in the first place and made it public. I love academia, how you can do something and then question yourself. And through that process, it was a very valuable process, because I realised that actually this is my response to Joe's death. And it's about him placing what should be inside on the outside. And yeah, and so in a way this is almost like my full stop, and realising that I've finally come to terms with Joe's death with this piece of work. I'm questioning now whether I take on the same of Joe.
In you becoming Joe, do you do a lot of research into him and his life, or is it more about getting to know him through performance of the objects?
It's a little bit of both. So through learning the routines, I was hoping to try and find something of him. Gosh, there was another piece of work I did where I worked with Sylvia, who's a composer, and there was a transcript of Punch's song from Joe's show. And I asked Sylvia to play it. I'd never heard it, and she played it. And then she said, oh, there's breaks in this, which sort of suggests a routine. And so we started to work, and I created a dance routine from the breaks in the music. But I chose not to just simply look at a bloody DVD of Joe doing the routine. And do you see what I mean? So it was trying to get underneath the research rather than go for the obvious. Yeah, and I mean, Rosie and I, we did meet with Jeff Felix, who knew Joe, and we gleaned different stories. I mean, Rosie can tell you herself. I mean, Rosie works with phototherapy. So I don't know if that is that over to you, Rosie.
Well, it was more about trying to discover who he was, but also to discover him through performing him and coming up with ideas like him becoming Punch as a way of moving through this notion of embodiment, to actually shift the embodiment from this puppeteer to the puppet that he was animating. So it was about also the idea of stepping into his shoes, and quite literally staged that. I photographed the process of becoming, the process of changing out of Nina, changing out of her own costume into his costume. So there was this whole idea of documenting the act of becoming as part of the process of recording. And my task was very much to be there and to encourage and to support, and to also be the heckling audience sometimes, or the delighted audience, or the sparring partner, to offer up more creative ideas for the process of. Because it was more like photographing a performance, I suppose, except it wasn't a performance to an audience, it was a performance in a safe space from which anything could be edited and anything could be discarded. And we made so much. Well, this is very much a taste of the whole process.
Yes.
It's a very beautiful taste, of course.
Yes. I mean, I did collaborate with Rosie in terms of the process. I didn't naively have an idea that we would get amazing images. And then it's kind of, well, what shall we do with these images? And we're still trying to sort of figure that out. But I'm delighted that we indulged ourselves and had this print made up for the exhibition. I get a lot of flack from some feminist friends who kind of think, well, why on earth are you looking at Punch and Judy? You know, I mean, it's a horrid show. And, you know, I ask myself that question. But I'm intrigued by the primordial energy of Punch and how that is linked to, you know, masculine sexuality, really, and power. And rather than my feminist, you know, four sisters, you know, I mean, in the 70s, I think there was Judy and Punch, or, you know, whatever. I mean, I'm interested now, you know, post-Judith Butler, of kind of looking at Punch within me and how that's going to be expressed, rather than trying to negate that. And actually, that's really rattling the cages, because Punch and Judy is a very male-dominated world. And ironically, the gay Punch and Judy men, and there are many closeted in their puppet booths, want to keep Punch straight, whereas the straight Punch men are absolutely open to me being quite, you know, playful with Punch. So watch this space.
Whilst we're speaking about bodies, I wonder whether we can all dare and go in the 16 body.
That's a very good segue. Yes, do come into the school. Well, we've had a lot of fun here, and I'm delighted that where's she gone? Hiding. Julie Parker's here. Julie Parker worked at DEADpuppet for quite a few years as the production manager, and oh my goodness, I mean, the pressure was on with Justin Farndale with the getting of the lights, and you know, I publicly thank Julie for coming in and helping, and she created the lighting scape for this room. I really like it. I think it's so kitsch. It's brilliant. I mean, you know, it's responding to the space, really. I mean, this is a black space, black box within the gallery. And so, you know, immediately I wanted to put spooky things in it and just exploit that. and so I began gathering them up. Unfortunately, there's just in Farndale did an amazing trick with a hacked-in Xbox and a video projector, but I think it. Oh, where's Emma?
Yeah.
Was it the second week when they?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we had a power failure, and all the sockets on this side of the building went off, and the computers went off. So and you have to set it up. Yeah, so
it crashed the computer.
To start it from scratch is quite a task unless you know how to use it.
Unless you're just in Farndale.
Then one does.
Yeah, so that's not active.
What did it show?
It showed the puppet in the box, and he had managed to reconfigure it with this software. I think it's called Animate, so that you would stand here and you'd be triggering a film of the puppet, but you'd be able to move your head, and the image of the puppet would move, and you could raise your arm, and the puppet would. So it was quite funky actually, but it's kind of cutting edge stuff, and so cutting edge that we really needed just to be here.
Well, at least the pirate is there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and given that we're in a black box as well, I wonder whether these are symbolic or figurative or more performative maybe, or differently performative. Or if you feel any difference between the other spaces and this one. Also because the arrangement feels very theatrical.
Yes. Yes. I think for me personally, these feel the most dead. And these, I was delighted to get all the phallic puppets from Barry Smith's collection. Barry Smith was a puppeteer. He died in 1989 from an AIDS-related illness. He was always very open about his sexuality, gay sexuality, which obviously was very valuable to me as a kind of young lesbian puppeteer. So it was just, just good. But his death in '89 was reported as a lung disease, I think, within the obituary animations, and that kind of shows the state of play around the the hiding of AIDS. At that time. It was interesting with Mandela's death and seeing footage last night on the television and his openness about his son's death from AIDS and how big that was at that time for him to be so open about it. I'm delighted to have resurrected Barry's phallic puppets. Interestingly, when I saw these in performance, it was incredibly heterosexist, and I was quite angry at the sexist stereotyping that he did in portraying of these phallic puppets. It wasn't, he didn't reference his own gayness with the phallus. It was more the kind of heterosexual titillation. But it's still nice to honour his memory, I think, and also have very adult material just to remind us that puppets are a powerful and potent image for an adult audience. It was the venue that requested that no children are allowed in here. I think it is quite a threatening, quite an intense space for a young child to come into. So,
is it not allowed or only allowed?
It's the children are allowed at all in here. I mean, I suppose if you've got my 10-year-olds are very, intelligent, kind of shirt parent, then maybe they would. Yeah, and likewise for for the general audience of the show, I've put 16 plus. And again, really, it's just a kind of reminder to audience that, you know, puppets are also a wonderful art form for adults. And also because I've taken a lot of risk in how they've been presented, you know, it's open exhibition, and so, you know, and some of the puppets are very fragile, and particularly the floor work. I know Emma had an issue of parents bringing in the child who, yes, of course we'll, you know, look after the child, and then she saw the kid kind of playing with a balloon, kind of, you know. So again, it's just as a reminder, really. As we've got you all gathered, I will show you. At one point I wanted to get a lot of archival puppets that were still in the boxes, because I really love the way that they're put away, and I wanted to explore that, and with a pretentious kind of nod to you know, Tadeusz Kantor and his emballage, his wrapping of objects, but that's not a road that I took. But there is this box, and I'll show you the puppet in it, because it really does need to be animated to be seen for its full effect. I was privileged to be in Tokushima, and I was actually in the home of the puppeteer that made this. When it turned up, when it arrived, we commissioned it. It was in this kind of funny Pokemon. So here it is. It's a very, very beautiful Bunku head. So it's a really. And again, when Ducot was wound up, we found he owned none of the puppets, so they were all given to the Puppet Centre Trust. So this puppet is now within their collection, so if you want a closer look, then you know, it's accessible. But anyway, the trick is this. So using the base. So beautiful. It's lovely, isn't it? And you know, that's just, you know, that does need to be seen. You know, I mean, we could have a film of it, its face flipping out, but it's not quite the same, is it, as you being seeing it.
I was interested when I read about the Japanese puppet that they often repaint the faces and give them different characters before different shows. And I was just wondering if you ever take any of your puppets apart and remake them into another character.
That's an interesting question. Several of the puppets have been reused in other performances, particularly the dogs and the little pigeon. And the only puppet that I've done that with, in terms of totally reconfigurating, was a head of the puppet that's on the floor, the murdered puppet. And I actually used her head as a giant puppet image for an event called A Million Women Rise, which is a march that happens in London against male violence against women. And we made this great big kind of bread and puppet-esque flying woman image. So it's the only time I've really reused an image like that, and it seems such a beautiful thing to do with that particular character, because in the show, as you've heard, you know, she's murdered and raped, and so it's really nice that we were literally able to resurrect her and present her in that powerful form. This is a lot of me waffling on, so, you know, do feel free to just throw out your questions to me or any observations. I mean, I'm really conscious that I've not over-labelled things, We've got the map for you, and I'm just wondering if that's a frustration, an annoyance for you, or whether you quite like the fact that I haven't over-egged where the puppets originally were from.
Sadly, some of us need to get trained.
Oh!
So we don't want you to think we're just going to disappear.
Well, it's just a delight that you have here. Thank you so much.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Maybe Emma could give you, a survey. You could fill in on the train and send back to me. That's great, thank you. Yes, and likewise, I didn't want to have a lot of video footage. You know, how the puppets were in performance. And again, I'm interested to know whether it's a loss for you that you can't see the puppets in the context of the performance, or whether you quite like the fact I've left it very open.
I think there's almost, when I see the puppets and I look at them, I'm already thinking what's the form, making a story in my head about it and reading about it. I just find it interesting to compare what I thought and my reactions to the puppets and what your actual description is and where it came from.
Well, that's good. So for you it's a kind of right mix.
Yeah.
Well, I think it could have been offered in another room, so it wasn't.
Sorry.
I think a video, if you had snippets of something being used, that would be in another room, so it was multiple people. So it didn't take away from what we've done here.
Yes.
But the people who might be curious to know that actually.
We've kind of done that in a way, because there is the kind of stuff online.
Yeah.
Which I suppose isn't the same as walking to another room, but if I could have added something else, I would have. I've got a lot of the paper archive of DEADpuppet, so I would have liked to, and I will in the future look at how that might help with some of the story. But I hate it when you go into an exhibition, it's all video.
It's all text, yes.
Well, I found it really brave actually to allow these puppets to speak in different ways, and the context was so much, and then position next to each other. There's lots of history there, there's lots of narrative and lots of context. Yes, they pose problems in relation to each other, and in relation to the space and the whole exhibition for me, not having that matched on the space.
The performances next to kind of emphasise them as being something from the past, and it would almost, I don't know, just defeat why you put them there now, in terms of giving them a chance to be there, to kind of to be there as something new.
Yes. The one thing I do feel is lacking is sound. And that was partly, my budget's right up to the limit, and I did make 2 Arts Council applications. The first was recommended for funding but not successful, so we kind of reapplied and it wasn't successful. If it had been, I would have worked with Sylvia Hallett, who did a lot of the sound for DEADpuppet, because I think that would have been quite interesting. To have some elements of sound. I would have particularly liked that in this room actually, to really gear up the kitcheners, but and also in the shadow room maybe. But yeah.
What kind of sound would you have had maybe?
Well, for Golem, which is the show referenced in the corner, Sylvia made this amazing kind of funny little spooky soundtrack. Kind of really kind of funny little whisperings and things. And yeah, no, I would have liked to have tried it in here. It might have been too much, but it would have also been quite fun, I think. But also just have her respond as an artist with the DEADpuppet sound archive and how she might have wanted to create sound within the exhibition. I think it would have been really lovely to have been able to do that. And I'd certainly like to work with her on that in the future.
Can I ask what it was
be a puppeteer curating an exhibition of puppets? Whether you were aware of like different ways of behaving towards them, whether they became different things at different points in the process, or...
I think I would have been interested with that if I hadn't been so close to a lot of the puppets. As you know, a lot of the puppets are decoys. They hold so many memories for me. So I was surprised at how sad I was at moments with some of the puppets. You know, the kind of amazing memories wrapped in those puppets. So in a way, it's kind of, the exhibition is a bit like laying bare my life in a way. And I know Rachel Field has visited the exhibition a couple of times, and I think again she finds it, you know, quite difficult in that way. That's not sort of answering your question in terms of a puppeteer, but you know, I'm such a theatre whore. I mean, I've created such a, you know, I've manipulated you. You know, I can't really stop myself from doing it. So, you know, there's definitely, you know, an author to the narrative that you're seeing, and that comes from me as a puppeteer and from my knowledge of the shows.
And do you think that also stopped the puppets from dying?
Yes, I do, and that's partly, I suppose, why I would like some of the puppets just, you know, taken to the tip when I die, because it seems like a nice poetic justice for the puppets that they return from whence I made them, just as I return to the earth.
So you can't have somebody dressed up as you then at the
Oh my goodness me.
Gosh.
I wonder if that was an important part of, because your choice of materials, I mean, I know with the, I don't know, the wire that you bought your first for the workshop that time, that you picked that out of the canal, and I wondered if there was a kind of cycle in a way, in terms of the way you make your puppets and choose the materials, and yeah, and I also wondered if the materials that you chose, you chose them because they have a movement that's intrinsic in them already, and that reflects perhaps what you would want to do with them theatrically.
Yes. I mean, I love going to car booths, and you know, if I've got a character to make, then I'll go to the car booth, just, you know, thinking cow or something, you know. The materials certainly do have a resonance and suggest things. I don't really like working with new materials. I can't stand foam, you know, the kind of puppet foam.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted to do an break to grab a drink, or if you're okay.
Well, I'm concerned for other people, really. I mean, I really apologise, because you just press my button and off I we'll talk forever, really. So, yeah, no, if you feel you'd like a break, then please go and, have a coffee. And then if you want to come back in and ask more personal, individual questions, then I'm here for another hour. So.
Well, it's up to you if you're okay. I was just mentioning it because I know a couple of people just asked about breaks.
Yeah. Does that seem a good thing for you lot, or do you want to
carry on?
Carry on!